This week, I made a sign for my friend Brandy Brooks, who's running for office. Hi everyone, welcome back to the City Aperture channel. My name is Jose. I go by City Aperture. And today I'm going to show you how I made this sign right here. Which is the sign for my friend Brandy Brooks, who is running for Montgomery County At-large here in Maryland. Made completely out of wood, mostly plywood and some basswood. I mean, I tried to make it like a sort of old school sign that you would see made completely out of wood. That was the look I was going for, and I think it works. So we're gonna go through the process. Mostly, I did everything with hand tools except for the lettering. And I'll bring up some close-up shots of it here. But yeah, let's just walk through how I did it, and we'll talk at the end. The first thing I did was to laser cut the letters. I laser cut many of them because I didn't know how thick I wanted the letters to be. All the letters were kind of 1/8 inch basswood. Here you're seeing the more script-like letters being cut. I know I wanted some of them to be thicker than others to create a little bit of depth. So I cut more of the script type letters and the more blocky letters, which are you seeing here. You're seeing being cut here. Yeah, and again, everything was cut at 1/8 inch on the laser. It was very quick. Next step was to take a piece of plywood. I got just a regular piece of plywood. It was 3/4 of an inch, and nothing special, no veneers, nothing, because I wanted it to be rough. I wanted to have a rough side to it, so I'm using the rough side down, and then I'm putting some grooves into it to give it a little bit of texture. I just sort of set the blade at the distance that I wanted, and I would go on both sides of it just to have equal spacing for the grooves. And then finally did one in the middle, which is the last one you're seeing cut here. Here you see the grooves on the piece of plywood, and you see a lot of texture to the wood. That's what I wanted. I wanted it to show all that texture. Next step was I had printed out a large version of the logo, and the logo has, as you guys have seen, it's the outline of Montgomery County in Maryland. So I printed out a piece of paper, and I'm just sort of spray mounting it down on the piece of wood so I can cut it. Montgomery County has a sort of very distinct shape here, and it's integrated into a lot of the materials that is being used by the campaign. There it is. It's all glued down, and then I get out my my jigsaw and just start cutting around the outline. It's kind of a rough cut, but it's okay because I'm going to go to the sander next. And here you see the final cut pattern of the county's outline. And then here I'm at the sanding, just sort of cleaning up the edges. I couldn't get to every edge, but I cleaned up as many of the edges as I could here in the disc sander. The ones that I couldn't get to, I just used a Dremel with a sanding drum on. But this cleaned up a lot of it. I was surprised I was able to get into as much of it as I could. So now it's time to glue the letters. I decided how I wanted the name Brandy to be the thickest, so I used 4 layers of 1/8 inch basswood to glue together, and I glued them all together. And then also the Brooks part was just 2 layers of it. That way it gives it a little bit of depth as you look at them. Next thing was the part that says for Montgomery County at large. I just wanted it to be painted. I wanted it to not have any depth at all. But in order to be able to paint it by hand later, I used a new tool I got, which is a wood engraver I got at Harbor Freight, and I just outlined the letters, because that would let me then see it after I painted everything. I could see the outlines, and I could paint that lettering in, which you'll see later. Then it's a lot of painting. There was a lot of painting in this project. Here I'm painting the individual letters before gluing them down. Well, this one's the star that I'm painting currently. It was just three colors. There was a light blue, a purplish color, and then the white. So, I had to be very careful. This is where I noticed actually that when I paint, sometimes I put a lot of paint down. It's kind of sloppy, so I was trying to be a little bit more delicate with it because I knew as I painted some of the other letters, it was going to have to be a light touch. So, I think one of the things that we got to be more careful with is having just the right amount of paint on the letter or on the brush. Too much paint on the brush just makes it messy and spill from the sides. So I really worked to not put too much paint on the brush. Now it's time to paint the Montgomery County outline. And this, because I wanted to get the texture look, I started by watering down the paint so it would get in all the crevices first. There's a very watered down amount of paint here. Just sort of brushing it on and getting it all deep into everything. And as I progressed, I would little by little put less water in the paint just to, again, I didn't want to have a thick layer of paint in the whole thing, so it was just layers upon layers of decreasingly less watered down paint until I got a nice solid color and I think enough texture. It's hard to see in the video and in the photos, but there's a lot of texture to the front of it, which was important to me. Finally here, before gluing everything down, I glued the paper back onto the outline and just sort of made marks so I could see where the letters would go, because otherwise I wouldn't have any way of lining them up. So I just made a bunch of cuts that would allow me to align all the letters, and you'll see here after I've made a bunch of cuts, I'm going to put them all down because now I have a guide basically as to where the letters go. One last thing before gluing everything down is I gotta paint now the words that say for Montgomery County at large. And while it looks like I'm doing a really good job of painting it here, like freehand, I can see very lightly the outlines that I had engraved into the wood. Because I engraved it before it was painted, you don't see them too much, but the light catches it right and I can see the engraving and it's easy for me to paint. Again, I did multiple coats in order not to mess it up and put too much paint down. I was trying to be very careful to put just a little bit of paint down. And now it's just time to glue everything down. You can see the front Montgomery County letters I think came out really well. And it's just a matter of start gluing. I put wood glue on everything. I tried the technique of putting wood glue and a couple of dabs of super glue to hold it down, but it just wasn't working. So I decided, let me just put wood glue on everything very quickly, and then let's put weight on it. So here you're watching me at first trying to hold it down, but it's not working. So I just bailed on that and said, look, let's just put glue on everything. So I'm using a little brush to put wood glue on everything. And then you're going to see me reach for some weights to hold all the weight down, to hold all the lettering down. The pieces of wood are just so that it makes even weight across the whole thing. I let it glue overnight, and there it is, it's ready. Last thing, I turned it around and I put a little hanging metal piece on it. It's usually used for frames, but this worked for this one. Taped it down and again had to struggle with tiny little screws with my big hands, but eventually I screwed it down, and that's all there is to this build. So let's look at the finished photos here. And there it is. Again, it has a sense of depth. You can see some of the texture. I like the way the lines came out. So there you go. That's how I made this sign for a hopefully future Montgomery County Commissioner, Brandy Brooks. It was fairly straightforward. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you're in Maryland in the Montgomery County area, support Brandy. She's a great candidate. She's got a lot of great ideas and definitely deserves it. Hopefully you'll see this sign with her as she goes through different events. So thanks for watching, guys. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you guys like this project, then maybe you'll enjoy the podcast that I do with my two colleagues, Claudia and Ray. We discuss purpose-driven design, making, and manufacturing. We talk about architecture. We talk about all sorts of making. We have a project of the week. So yeah, please check it out. Again, it's called The Made Podcast. Thanks so much.